We are going to move on to Ordinance number 1682, which is the Comprehensive Plan Amendment, Large-Scale Future Land Use Map Amendment. Now, I see a lot of new faces in here this evening. I'm going to make some announcements. I want everybody to heed to these announcements. If everybody follows the instructions I'm about to give, this hearing will go smoothly, it'll go quickly, everybody will get to have their voice. First thing is we're going to be respectful and we're going to listen to all the information presented, whether it's by the applicant, by the staff, or by us. There is no, and I repeat, none, hooting, hollering, clapping from the audience. You will be removed. Keep your public comments when made succinct and to the point. NIMBY is not a legal argument. So don't just come up here and say, I don't want it in my backyard. Direct your comments to the issue, not to any individual in this room or not in this room this evening. Again, you will be cut off and you will be asked to sit down. The city does not control school capacity issues. So please, during your public comment, it is not a consideration. This is a system-wide issue as set by the state statute and the state legislature. This applicant has his required letter that he needs for this hearing this evening. He will need future letters if this moves forward. But as of right now, nothing about the school, guys. Nothing we can do. The city does not control stormwater design, so don't bring it up as an issue. That comes at site plan if they get that far, and it's controlled by St. Johns River Water Management District. Try not to be redundant. If your point has already been made up at the podium, there's no reason to make it a second time. If it's been made, it's been made. As we get to the end, because I have 11 or 12 speakers who have signed up, a lot of these points are going to be made. You can simply come on up to the microphone, give us your name and address, and just say you're against the project. You'll be on the record. That's what most of you are here to do this evening. Once we close the public comment portion, because we'll go to the staff first, then we're going to go to the applicant, then we're going to go to public comment. Once that is closed, it is closed. There is no more public comment. There's no yelling out from the audience. The applicant at that time will come up. They will keep track of any questions that you have. That is when your questions will be answered. It is not an English Parliament debate between the podium and the dais or the applicant. When the applicant is done, we will make a motion. We will have our discussion. That is our time to have a discussion. Again, the public comment has been closed. The council will vote. If it fails, it fails. If it passes, this is only the first hearing. This is a transmittal hearing. I don't think that a lot of you understand that from what I've seen on social media. It goes from here to the state to be reviewed. During that time of review, any of those questions that you've all brought up is the time that staff and the applicant huddle up together. It comes back for a second hearing with more information. So I don't know if that was clear. Takes about 30 days for that to happen, just so everybody knows. Now, I watched the LPA hearing. The LPA hearing got a little unruly. That is not the way these are run. All right? So we all clear? Let's get started. Mr. Groot, can you call up the ordinance, or read the ordinance by title only for me, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Ordinance number 1682, an ordinance of the City of Oviedo, Florida, amending the future land use map of approximately 61.24 acres of land generally located south of Mitchell Hammock Road and east of Clara Evans Way as follows. Approximately 23.02 acres from downtown mixed use south of Mitchell Hammock subarea DMU to downtown mixed use new downtown subarea DMU. Approximately 6.80 acres from rural R to downtown mixed use new downtown subarea DMU, and approximately 31.42 acres from rural to public, providing for legislative intent, implementing actions and savings provisions, scrivener's errors, conflicts, and severability, and providing for an effective date. That's the ordinance by title, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Groot. Mr. Cobb, please enlighten everyone.
Thank you, Mayor. Madeline, if you could pull up the PowerPoint for us too, please.
Give us a moment, we'll get the PowerPoint up there. And folks, the only reason why I read all that rules is after 20 years of doing this, I know how these things will turn out if we all just follow the rules.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight, the council is requested to conduct a public hearing and then to transmit a large-scale comprehensive plan amendment to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity and the associated review agencies that go along with that. This is, being a large-scale comprehensive plan amendment, it has a statutory process that must be followed. The first thing is that it has 3 public hearings. The first public hearing is with our local planning agency. As you can see on the screen, it was conducted on April 4th, 2019. Tonight is the City Council's transmittal hearing, and what you're going to be deciding tonight is whether or not this future land use map amendment should be transmitted to the state of Florida for its review. The Florida Department of Economic Opportunity and the associated review agencies, some of which are the Florida Department of Transportation, the Department of Environmental Protection. Seminole County is going to review it, as well as Winter Springs, the Regional Planning Council. There's a number of the State Division of Historic Resources going to review this. They have 30 days to look over the proposal and to get us any comments they may have back. We anticipate that the council adoption hearing will be held in November of 2019. If the council adopts the hearing and adopts the land use map amendment, and that's not being done tonight. Tonight is just transmittal. It will become effective 31 days after the adoption if the Department of Economic Opportunity doesn't have any comments. Madeline, if we could go to the next slide. The subject property is 61.24 acres. It's located on the south side of Mitchell Hammock Road and on the east side of Clara Evans Way. It does contain 56.93 developable acres. There are some wetland acres that are concentrated in the northeast part of the property that is adjacent to Lake Rogers. Go to the next slide, Madeline. Currently, the future land use designation for the property is 23.02 acres as a downtown mixed use south of Mitchell Hammock Road subarea, and approximately 38.22 acres is designated rural on the city's future land use map. And go to the next slide. Now, the rural land use designation, please do not confuse this with the rural boundary, which is adopted by Seminole County. But the rural land use designation, it has permissible uses in it, such as single-family residential, agricultural uses. It does allow for recreation. Public and private elementary schools can be located on the property. And when the city adopted its comprehensive plan back in 1993, the rural land use designation was used as a placeholder for properties that did not have proper municipal services at that time. And then as municipal services have been expanded, the rural land use designation has been changed to other land use designations. As to this property not being changed, I really can't say, council, why we haven't moved forward with this earlier, but this property does have full municipal services. You can also see that the land use does not allow for commercial feedlots, either confined or exterior. Now, one thing to note, council, is that the maximum density, this is residential density for this land use designation, is less than 1 dwelling unit per acre. I can tell you that the rural land use designation, the only other place that it exists is over along Lake Jessup Avenue. And it's an area west of Lake Jessup that the lot sizes there comply with the rural land use less than 1 dwelling unit per acre. And so we've never really had an opportunity, really a need to change that area to a low-density residential. But that's the only other area that has rural land use. Madam, if you, the western part of the property is downtown mixed use south of Mitchell Hammock Road subarea. Now, what this, as you can see, this calls for mixed use. But the one thing about it is that the comprehensive plan calls for a mixing of minimum and maximum percentages of uses. And so if you look at the minimum residential is 5%, the maximum is 30%. When you look at the non-residential uses, the minimum is 70%, the maximum is 95%. So development could occur with mixed-use development anywhere within those minimum and maximum ranges, but it cannot exceed them. If you look at the various maximum density, single families up to 5, multifamilies up to 15. Commercial maximum floor area ratio is 0.75. Maximum office floor area ratio is 0.3. One of the things that you will notice that on the south side of Mitchell Hammock Road, the downtown mixed-use district is more concentrated on commercial development than it is for residential. So that is one of the things about this south of Mitchell Hammock Road subarea is that it's highly concentrated, really promotes commercial development over residential development, even though it does require a minimum and maximum for residential development. If we go to the next slide, Matt. Originally, the applicant proposed to designate the entire property as downtown mixed-use new downtown. What the applicant wanted to do was to give it the same land use designation that we have on the north side of Mitchell Hammock Road. The applicant wanted to bring in a mixed-use development that included both commercial office, it included residential, and it also included mixed-use buildings that had commercial on the bottom floors and residential above. This proposal went before the local planning agency on April the 4th, 2019. The local planning agency recommended denial. And they stated concerns that were relative to the development program, the traffic congestion, impact to the schools, and impact to the environment, and impacts to the population. That was the concerns that were expressed by the local planning agency. You can see there the proposal was to go to the new downtown subareas. You can see it's a different required percentage of mixing of uses. Residential uses can be minimum of 40% and maximum of 80%. When you looked at the south of Mitchell Hammock Road, it was 5 and 30. If you look at the non-residential uses with the minimum of 20 and the maximum of 60, when you think about the south of Mitchell Hammock Road, with its orientation toward commercial, it was a minimum of 5, or a minimum of 70, a maximum of 95%. So it's a more balanced mixed use. It also is more of a promotion of what we call vertical mixed use. In other words, with the commercial office on the bottom and then the residential on top. You can see it's also, it's a more urban development is what it is, whereas the south of Mitchell Hammock Road, I would say, is on the high end of suburban development. This is a more urban development with up to 16 dwelling units per acre for single-family, multifamily being 30 dwelling units per acre. Mixed use, and once again, vertical mixed use, 50 dwelling units per acre, and then floor area ratios up to 1.0. And then if we're east of Oviedo Boulevard, then it's a floor area ratio of 0.35, and that's in keeping with the residential areas to the east of Oviedo Boulevard. And so we want to make sure that that's consistent, and that's what this land use designation is. One of the things I want to tell you about council is that this area is the area that the city, through its comprehensive plan, dating back to 2002, has said this is the area where we want to direct growth. Our downtown mixed-use district, as well as this area here. If you think about, if you want to say what would we consider our urban core, we would look from the planning perspective, we would be looking at from a southern terminus of Alafay Woods Boulevard all the way up to the northern terminus of Franklin Street, or maybe even possibly Magnolia. And so that was our urban core, and that's what our comprehensive plan says. We want to direct the development and redevelopment of the city into this area. And one of the things that this does is that it creates that connection across Mitchell Hammock Road. It brings the city hall area into the downtown. It's an infill is what it does. It fills in that hole. And so that's one of the things that the proposal for tonight, that's one of the things that I wanted to stress to you tonight, is that from a comprehensive plan perspective, is that this is the area that we wanted to be, not on the outer edges of the city, but here in the urban core. Madam, if you would please, thank you. Future land use element policy 1-1.1.4. This is the criteria for which our staff review all of our comprehensive plan amendment applications. It's also one that they use to review the zoning map amendment designations. And you can see there's 10 different things, and it's consistency with the comprehensive plan, the impact to our projected level of services. One of the things I want to tell you about with that, council, is that when you're dealing with mixed use, in the old days when we had a Department of Community Affairs, they would come in and say, give us your worst case scenario. And I can tell you, like for the public land use, the worst case scenario was always a high school. Didn't matter how big the property could be, 1 acre, and the Department of Community Affairs would say it's a high school. Didn't matter that the minimum acreage you needed for a high school was 50 acres. That didn't matter. They wanted the worst case scenario. So one of the things that we did on the front end is that we went and we talked with this Department of Economic Opportunity. We also talked with the Department of Transportation in that we said trying to find a maximum for mixed use is difficult to do. But we have this applicant, they have a development program that they want to propose. Can we base our impact analysis on that development program? And the Department of Economic Opportunity, the Department of Transportation both signed off on that methodology for doing this analysis. And so the impacts, the original impacts were based on the development program that was proposed at that time. We also look at the current supply of vacant land. We look at the funding commitments for required improvements, the impact on natural resources. We look at the population impact. All those things are taken into consideration when the staff prepares their supporting data and inventory and analysis, which is attached to your staff report. Council, I'm not going to bore you with the details tonight. All the details are in that report. The Department of Economic Opportunity is going to review that report, but I'm going to try to just give you an overview of what's being proposed. Madeline, if we could go on to the next slide. As you can see here, the original development that was proposed was 150,300 square feet of commercial, about 80 rooms of a hotel. There was 927 dwelling units that were proposed. And the staff and the city's consultant, they reviewed those infrastructure impacts associated with that proposed development because it was the methodology that we got the state to agree to. And what they found was, from a comprehensive plan perspective, and that's one of the things you're going to hear me say a lot, from a comprehensive plan perspective, that the impacts associated with that development program could be accommodated within the city's adopted level of service standards. And that includes traffic, that includes water, sewer, drainage, recreation. All those different things, it could be accommodated within that. We also had a letter from the school district. Actually, we've gotten 2 or 3 letters from the school district. We've learned a lot about their concurrency system as we've gone through this process, and each time they've come back and said within their concurrency service area, there is capacity to serve this project or to preserve the change. And that's one of the things that I would also like to stress to you tonight. When you're considering a proposed amendment to your comprehensive plan, you're looking at the proposed change. That's what you're looking at, the change. As in this case, the change from downtown mixed use, south of Mitchell Hammock Road, and rural, to downtown mixed use, new downtown, and public. So you're looking at the change. And the things that we have now, we'll go over how some of that has thing. Well, on April the 4th, the applicant, as I mentioned before, got a recommendation of denial from the local planning agency. And he sat and he listened. He listened very closely to what was being said at the public hearing. And he came back, we talked later, and he said, I need to revise my application. I need to scale it back a little bit. Well, he's allowed to do that in between the public hearings. He's allowed to make those revisions. And so, Madeline, if we could go to the next one. So he did. He revised it down. So now we have the proposal. Tonight's proposal is to whether or not to transmit the future land use map amendment to change to 29.82 acres to downtown mixed use, new downtown sub-area, and then 31.42 acres to the public land use. And so this is the revised proposal that is being proposed tonight for transmittal to the Department of Economic Opportunity. Madeline, if we could go on to the next slide, please. Okay, the downtown mixed-use new sub-area. We reviewed this already, but I just wanted to bring it back just to refresh your memory. We have minimum and maximum residential, minimum 40, maximum 80. Minimum non-residential, 20%, 60%, maximum 60%. You can see, once again, the single-family maximum density is up to 16. The multifamily maximum density is up to 30. Mixed-use maximum, when we have residential on top of commercial, is up to 50. Commercial office maximum is a floor area ratio of 1.5 unless it's east of Oviedo Boulevard, which is 0.35. One thing I want to mention too, Dr. Correa asked me to do this tonight, is to call to your attention on page 4 of your staff report. There is a typographical error regarding, it talks about 18 units per acre, and really it should be 15 units per acre as far as the new downtown south of Mitchell Hammock Road sub-area. We'll make sure that that gets corrected before it goes up to the state, but I wanted to call that to your attention. She felt horrible about it, that there was this typographical error, and but we will make that correction. We could go on to the next slide, Madeline. Okay, so Eastern portion, the 31.42 acres is being proposed for public land uses. You can see the different uses that are allowed there are public institutional, and conservation. Public lands are considered recreation, community and government services, utilities, public facilities, water and sewer treatment facilities. As the current use there, we have our percolation ponds for wet weather storage and for reject storage from our sewer plant. Institutional uses are educational uses. Now, not just elementary schools. Now we can do all three ranges, elementary, middle, and high school, as far as educational uses, as well as college, too. Cultural uses, religious uses. We have a maximum floor area ratio of 0.5, and so that would be the proposed land use for the eastern 31.42 acres of the property. And if we could go to the next one. As I mentioned before, the applicant scaled back his development. So the impacts, following the same methodology that we used in the first review, the impacts of the commercial was reduced from the 150,000 to 97,000 square feet. We also have 58,000 square feet, 58,600 square feet of office. And then the total dwelling units is 600 dwelling units. You can see there they've gone to a mid-rise as well as age-restricted dwelling units. Now, once again, the staff and the consultants reviewed the infrastructure impacts associated with the proposed, with this proposed development, and they found that it also is, can be accommodated within the city's adopted level of service standards. Madeline, if we go to the next slide. As this is a repeat of the earlier slide, Council, just want to remind you that the staff, when they do this review, they are basing it on the comprehensive plan. One of the things Dr. Clara mentioned to me today was that they also took a look at the downtown master plan and saw that this property was referenced in it as well. In looking at this element and the criteria, they did the review of the impacts of the new proposal. And Madeline, if we could go to the next slide. This is staff's findings. The staff did find that it is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan and the future land use map series. They found that the infrastructure impacts of the proposed change can be accommodated with the city's adopted level of service standards. They found that the proposed land use designations are compatible with the surrounding land use designations. They found, in the analysis of vacant land, they found that the only vacant land that's got the new downtown sub-area is directly across the street on the north side of Mitchell Hammock Road, and that property is either in plan review or it's under construction right now. So as far as the amount of vacant land with the new downtown sub-area future land use designation is very limited, as well as the public land use designation. Most of the vacant land that's public land use is owned by the city, and it was designated that way on purpose. So the vacant land is limited as far as the two land use designations. The city and the applicant have been working. One of the things with the traffic analysis is that it includes the extension of Oviedo Boulevard to the south and connecting it to Alexandria. One of the things that our consultant found was that it creates capacity. It adds capacity to the city street network, and so it actually helped in the traffic flow for the proposal. And we are in discussions right now for a public-private partnership, similar to what we did with Oviedo on the Park, to look at the stormwater system, to look at this extension of the roadway. Madeline, can we go to the next slide? The city's environmental consultant didn't look at the revised program, but they did look at the original program, which was more intensive, and they didn't find any concerns as far as from an environmental perspective. The future land use map amendment also provides an opportunity to increase the number of the amount of non-residential lands for economic use, and that's primarily the 6.8 acres. If you look at the area that was already downtown mixed use, it provides economic opportunity, but it provides more of a balanced economic opportunity than what the existing south of Mitchell Hammock Road designation does. The land use will bring, it's estimated, 1,962 residents. One of the things that I wanted to tell you about, because I see a lot of times a lot of folks are going to say we have uncontrolled growth. And the thing about it is that since 2000, the city has grown at an average of 2.24% a year. And what that means from a comprehensive plan perspective is that we're not growing as fast as our comprehensive plan anticipated. And so what that means is that the population impact of this proposal can be accommodated within the 2025 population projection that's in the comprehensive plan. We do not need to go in and revise our population projections to accommodate this. Lastly, yes, the school capacity. As I said before, the school district staff has said that there is capacity within the concurrency service area. And if we could go to the next slide. Finally, based on all these findings that the staff went through and based on their evaluation, the staff recommends approval of the proposed comprehensive plan amendment to change to 20.3.02 acres to New Downtown sub-area, and then the 31.42 acres to public. Therefore, council, it's recommended that the city council conduct a public hearing and approve a motion to transmit ordinance number 1682 to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity and the associate state and regional review agencies.
Thank you, Mr. Cobb. Is the applicant present?
Good evening. My name is Tara Tedrow. I'm an attorney at Lounge Drosdick, 215 North Eola Drive, Orlando, Florida. And Madeline, I had a presentation too, if we're able to pull that one up on the screen. We can go to the next slide. Well, Mr. Cobb did such a good job that I'm going to have to breeze over some of these slides so I won't be too repetitive because I know we have a lot of folks who want to put in some comments tonight. But this shows you the property as it sits now. You can see that what looks like squares on that property are our existing spray fields. So it's an underutilized site that the city has always contemplated would be part of an extension of a vibrant downtown. A downtown that would only be able to connect your old downtown, Oviedo on the Park, all the way through to your City Hall campus. If you look at where the project is situated, we're along some main traffic corridors. We're near existing single-family, multifamily, commercial, and professional offices. We have a couple renderings that I hope the audience was able to see before tonight, but otherwise we'll make sure that they're given the opportunity to see it afterward if they're not in the slides. We can go to the next slide. We'll go through a couple of these slides quickly because it just shows you the existing site conditions. If you run through these next slides, shows you that the land is currently vacant. It is just an existing property used, again, for reclaimed water spray fields that the city is currently under lease for with the existing property owner. If you go down to the next slide, you'll see that this is where the extension really makes the most sense. You have directly across the street from us, Oviedo on the Park, which has created a wonderful new downtown. Exactly what your comprehensive plan contemplates with a sense of place for the community. So it's not just supposed to be one isolated sense of place. We're trying to provide an extension of what Oviedo on the Park offers to your residents, so you can have an option of different living styles, whether you're an active adult, 55 and up with age-restricted units, whether you're a young family or a working professional or a student and want to be able to have multifamily options in a live, work, and play environment that allows you to access Oviedo on the Park without the reliance on vehicles, which is what we currently have when we spread out our developments and we don't allow for that compact mixed-use environment that your master plan and your comprehensive plan specifically contemplate. If you go to the next slide, one more, please. So the future land use designation, as you already heard from Mr. Cobb, it has a rural land use designation, but again, the comprehensive plan notes that rural areas are those that don't have adequate existing facilities. This rural designation is always contemplated to be changed at some point. We're bringing it perhaps before maybe staff would have initiated a change because it is inconsistent with what your comprehensive plan says that a rural piece of property should have fundamentally, which is no access to adequate facilities. So we already have the adequate facilities on this property, and we are situated directly near existing downtown mixed-use properties that have village core designations and that have a mix of different types of uses, which is exactly what we're trying to do with the extension of our property. You can see that another portion already has that downtown mixed use. One of the questions that always comes up is when we look at development, most of the time it's looked at as an either or. We just get vacant land or we get what the developer says. But part of this is that the property has entitlements. So as it exists today, the portion of that land that has that downtown mixed use designation has property rights and entitlements to be able to develop what Mr. Cobb has told you is essentially a very dense commercial development. So this property is a perfect extension for more strip mall type developments. But that is exactly what your comprehensive plan says we want to discourage in your new downtown area and in the downtown mixed-use areas adjacent to your city hall. If you go to the next slide, you can see the zoning designation. So our existing zoning designation, while it allows for a larger concentration of commercial and a smaller concentration of retail, given the development that you already have across the street, it only makes sense to match that development pattern. When you look at compatibility, which is defined under Florida statutory law, compatibility is not just match exactly what is next to you. It looks at whether or not you can create uses that are stable over time when next to each other. So that compatibility analysis tells you if we look at the single family around us and we have mixed use directly next to us, we have institutional uses, and what we're proposing tonight is exactly that. We are taking half of our acreage of our overall previously contemplated development program and saying that this is the city's to control. If you look at this picture, the old plan that we had was a very spread out, very dense, and very intense development program. And keep in mind, this development program met all of those 10 criteria of your comprehensive plan, even with the density and the intensity that we were requesting. But based on what we heard at the LPA hearing, we have a change. The change shows you, and this is a roadway extension that your staff drew up preliminarily, shows you that this allows for the city to have roughly 32 acres of property that it can control through a negotiated development agreement. That's a development agreement that has to come before you again for approval. Tonight is simply a transmittal. If you get us past tonight, what we come back before the LPA and then City Council is for your review and approval of a concurrent rezoning, as well as a development agreement that has a master land use plan attached to it that shows that as of now, we contemplate the city gets to control these 30-plus acres. You want to extend your City Hall campus there or public service facilities, you want to just have it be all parks and recreation, that would be up to the city to control, and that's what we've agreed to through the development agreement that we've submitted to the city for their preliminary review before it comes before a public hearing. Then we have an extension of Oviedo Boulevard, and we have our remaining acreage that would be used for a development that is compatible with exactly what your master planning and your comprehensive planning says should be in your new downtown area. You could go to the next slide, Madeline. Thank you. So the site is part of the multimodal transportation area. It's also part of your designated development corridors area. Having a rural piece of land in your designated development corridors area is incompatible with what your comprehensive plan says that development corridors are meant to have. These are high traffic areas, and in this high traffic area, I don't expect anybody tonight to say that they are happy with Mitchell Hammock Road. I don't think anyone's going to come up here and tell you that they like traffic in Oviedo. And we hear this often, but one of the things to think about is that this has always been meant to be a corridor for a lot of cars. And when we talk about traffic later, we'll show you that in the end, the development program that we are proposing is actually less than what would be generated. And I know no one is going to believe the developer or the developer's attorney when they say that, so I would urge you to talk to Cockwan, who is your city's independent traffic engineer, and ask him any of the questions that you want specific to traffic, because I know a lot of concerns may come from the residents tonight. Next slide, please. So that shows you our updated conceptual layout. Again, we minimized our development footprint in response to what we heard at the LPA. There were some concerns that we were bringing too much development too close to single-family residential to the east. Well, we have provided a 30-acre buffer. Now, typically my clients will provide a 50-foot buffer, maybe a 100-foot buffer. A 30-acre buffer is a significant buffering from those existing single-family uses that told us they didn't want any mixed use directly next to them. Now, even though your staff found that that would have been compatible and that we could have properly transitioned it with landscaping and other buffering provided under your code, we have still given that and said that is the city's to deal with if that's what they want. And even if the city tells us that you ultimately do not want to control this property, we have still hamstrung ourselves by putting a public future land use designation there, which means we can't come back and just extend out a mixed-use development over those 30-plus acres. We would be constrained by what the development programs permitted under public, which you saw include things like conservation or other city uses, very limited development opportunities. So we listened to what we heard from the residents, we listened to what the LPA said. We wanted to still provide that active adult lifestyle option. we wanted to still provide an extension of your new downtown. We wanted to provide the live-work area with a sense of place, with gathering spaces, parks, walkways, amenities, gardens, entertainment areas. We wanted to give those different options, not to compete with, but to complement what you already have with Oviedo on the park. And we can accomplish that with a smaller footprint than what was previously requested, given the feedback that we heard at the LPA hearing. Next slide, please. So you already heard Mr. Cobb go over this in great detail about the differences between the development programs. So what I think is important comes on the next slides. So the next slide tells you the differences. So we've reduced our commercial square footage by 53,000 plus square feet. Now, we did introduce office because there's a need for Class A office in this city. And this would give us the opportunity to bring Class A office spaces because people want to work where they have things to do around the office. They don't want to have to get in their car and drive and battle with any lunchtime traffic, perhaps, to go somewhere to lunch. You can just walk right outside your office, and heck, you might even live in one of the multifamily units on our site or across the street on Oviedo on the park. It provides that great connectivity and that mixed-use development pattern, again, that your comprehensive plan designates. We've also reduced the number of our standard multifamily by 212 units, from 652 to 440, and we've reduced our age-restricted active living units by 115 total, bringing it from 275 to 160. So we had over 900 units before, down to 600. Next slide, please. This gives you another updated development program showing the differences in the requests, so 700 square feet less of overall retail commercial office, 327 fewer dwelling units, and 31.42 less acres total that we're even asking to develop on. Now, over 700,000 square feet of commercial is permitted by right today on our 20-plus acres. Again, we could put a very dense commercial development on that property by right. By right means we come in with a site development order application, an architectural development order application, and we have to meet all of the requirements under your code, and short of asking for waivers and variances, we can develop. But instead, we want to do something that actually meets the intent of your comprehensive plan and actually meets your long-term master planning goals. So the proposed development program has been reduced through that negotiated DA that will control the project. So if anybody says, they're telling you that they're going to have this smaller development, but under the comprehensive plan, they could have a much larger one. By the time we come back for a second reading, which would be an adoption hearing of this comprehensive plan amendment, you will have heard our rezoning application along with our development agreement. And if we don't stick to any of the promises that we have made you tonight in that DA, then you can turn us down on second reading. But we ask for the opportunity to be able to bring that back before you for your consideration and approval. Next slide, please. So our plan provides the city, again, through that negotiated DA, pending your approval, 31.42 acres of public land for you to control, directly adjacent to the existing single-family subdivision, provides for minimally intense uses, and serves as that buffer and adequate transition between mixed-use and single-family homes. Next slide, please. So on traffic, I am not a traffic engineer, and I will not pretend to be one tonight. So again, I would urge you to ask your city's independent traffic engineer. It's not somebody that we pay. In fact, that's somebody that you all pay to do an independent review of the studies that we submit and the methodology that we have provided to you. That traffic study that was produced shows that we have a reduced development program that generates less traffic and will have less traffic impacts. So if you go to the next slide. So the current future land use designation would actually produce more trips than what we are proposing, and now we have even reduced that total by 30%. So here's a graph that we talked about with your city's traffic engineer just to make sure that we were correct in what we proposed. This graph shows you what is permitted by right today. But today, 21,995 cars could come out of our very dense 700,000 plus square foot commercial development. And those are commercial developments that my client does as his day job, putting in grocery anchored shopping centers. That's what drew him to the site to begin with. But then he realized that your comprehensive plan actually asked for a lot more. And that's where the idea for the mixed use came from when he talked to your staff over 2 years ago about this project. What we are requesting, again, traffic allowed versus traffic requested, and I understand, saying 6,653 cars sounds like a lot of cars, but you cannot look at it in a vacuum of just what our project would generate versus an empty site. Because you have to look at our property with the entitlements overlaid on it as to what could be generated, again, by right today. Go to the next slide, please. So with the Oviedo Boulevard extension, which we are still proposing, and again, the reason that we need some of the acreage that we have, we've already given up a lot, but if we just do our 23-acre downtown mixed-use by right development, there will be no Oviedo on the Oviedo Boulevard extension. There's no acreage for us to do it, and there's really no reason for us to want to do it. But we want to have this because of a mixed-use redevelopment of this property. So we would connect it from Mitchell Hammock Road. That goes all the way to Alafaya Woods Boulevard using Alexandria Boulevard. The benefits include things like a continuous parallel roadway to State Road 434. Reduces the need for local trips to commingle with regional trips on 434. You get local vehicular, bike, and pedestrian connectivity to Oviedo on the Park. You also have a visually appealing landscape boulevard that will be able to provide, with a potential local bypass of the congested State Road 434 and Mitchell Hammock Road, and also can reduce some of those emergency times, again, if you're taking cars off of 434 and Mitchell Hammock. And if there are any questions, again, I'm always happy to try to answer them, but I would urge you to see if your city's traffic engineer is able to give you some more detailed analysis about exactly how they came up with that independent review of our methodology. So our request tonight is for approval to transmit Ordinance 1682. And again, that's a 31.42 acre change from RL to public, amendment of 6.8 acres from RL to downtown, DMU New Downtown, and then 23.02 acres from downtown mixed use south of Mitchell Hammock to DMU New Downtown. The criteria for approval. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this because really you could read the entire comprehensive plan and see exactly why this project makes sense. But mixed-use development versus urban sprawl. There's a reason urban sprawl is something that is a pejorative in the planning world, right? People say urban sprawl is a bad thing. And it's a bad thing because we are taking all of the residential units and we are putting them far away from city services. So then you as a city have to begin extending out those services. It puts more of a burden on emergency management and personnel, and then it takes you away from being able to have a live, work, play environment or even any connectivity to other types of mixed uses within your city. So what we are saying is that your comprehensive plan told us you want mixed-use developments. This project and this property specifically, Mr. Cobb even told you, has been contemplated to have this type of mixed-use development on it. So your planning principles would suggest that the plan to convert a spray field and create this master planned community is a much better alternative. Now, urban sprawl, again, is something that your comprehensive plan seeks to avoid because it has a hard economic impact on a city when you have to duplicate the other needs of a city. And this creates a walkable environment, it reduces the need for cars, offers open space, recreation areas, and has a bunch of distinctive uses that will allow us, again, to extend out that sense of place that Oviedo on the Park has done a great job of creating for your city. So there's the policies that Mr. Cobb outlined for you, so we'll go to the next slide talking through those in some detail. Not going to read all of this out to you, but all of this is taken directly from your comprehensive plan. Your comprehensive plan notes almost ad nauseum the principles of a mixed-use community and why you want this for sustainable development. There is not enough acreage in the city of Oviedo to think that we can accommodate the needs for Class A office space, for multifamily living, for active adult, and for a vibrant mix of commercial and retail uses anywhere else. You have to look to these downtown urban cores to be able to put those uses to create consistency with the goals and objectives and policies of your comprehensive plan. Again, these are not the developer's words, are not our applicant's words. These are words taken directly from your comprehensive plan that talks about the exact type of development that you all want, saying that the city of Oviedo in the past has recognized a lack of sustainability in its existing land use pattern. And that's something that you can begin to combat. We're not asking you to take away single-family subdivisions. We're just saying that those are not appropriate for this downtown urban core that has already been created through your long-term master planning process. Moreover, it talks about how your comp plan specifically encourages infill and redevelopment with mixed uses and densities and intensities that support transit, walking, and bicycle options. And it only can be supported, that shift in transportation, that dependence on vehicles, through complementary changes to land use development patterns in the city. So that's a type of effective partnership, public and private, that policy 6-1.1.10 talks about, that we're hoping to bring tonight and bring back before you with our negotiated development agreement. In addition, the impact on established and projected levels of service. You already heard Mr. Cobb tell you that in all of the different areas that were analyzed, there is sufficient capacity not only to accommodate what we previously had proposed, but it certainly can accommodate the much smaller development program in comparison to what we had proposed previously. Also talks about compatibility. Remember, you don't just look at identical pre-existing land uses, you see how we can complement those land uses, and that is a sustainable development pattern over time. And we're putting residential near residential, commercial near commercial, mixed uses near mixed uses. We're allowing there to be city public lands next to city public lands. We are trying to create and fill out, again, that infill development of your urban core. There's already a current supply, when it asks about the current supply of vacant land already designated, the downtown mixed-use, new downtown sub-area is in Oviedo on the Park. Again, that was part of the compatibility analysis. Where else is this in the city? Directly across the street from us. Funding commitments for required improvements. Again, this is much less dense and intense in Oviedo on the Park. We are working with staff to create the pro formas for all of our specific improvements, including any relocation of public safety buildings or potential relocations of city halls or city-owned developments and public land use designation portions of our property, which will be contained in that negotiated development agreement. Impact on natural resources. This is always a question that comes up in any hearing, is people have concerns, and rightfully so, about environmental impacts. As it stands now, your staff, in their professional opinion, has concluded that we would not have an adverse impact. We still have to go through a site development order. That site development order, again, requires another level of your professional staff's analysis and any other regulatory agencies who have oversight over our development, such as water management districts or FDEP, to be able to evaluate whether or not we meet local and state criteria for our development. Tonight is not the time to talk about those types of impacts in specificity because, again, you actually have to submit all of your soil reports, your geotech surveys, your environmental reports. Those come at a later time. From all the preliminary analysis, though, your staff has concluded, based on what we have submitted over the last 2 years, that there is no adverse impact on natural resources. Population impact, again, you heard that there is enough in your comprehensive plan has contemplated an increase in the population, and we are well within the confines of what you have already contemplated to be able to sustain in terms of growth. Consistency with efforts to increase the supply of non-residential lands available for economic use. Again, your comp plan talks about wanting to be a full-service community with a range of uses to serve and support your residential population. We don't just want to have commercial strip center after commercial strip center. We want that vibrant mixed use for a reason. And consistency with efforts to increase the provision of a viable mixture of land uses in a compact, walkable area that is accessible to the full range of feasible non-motorized and motorized transportation modes. I think that is an actual summation of what our project is. We are proposing exactly that. We don't want to have a community where everyone drives everywhere. You should be able to walk and bike places, and you should be able to live, work, and play in close proximity to each other, and that's exactly what we've tried to achieve through our development program. And again, impact on schools, we won't go into that because it's already been analyzed. School board's already given us a letter saying that it can withstand and that there is the ability for us to have enough room in the schools as it stands today, but we still have to go through that review later. And finally, I've alluded to your downtown master plan policies. Won't read these verbatim to you, but all of your downtown master plan policies talk about and analyzed your city's demographics. It talks about how you want specialty retail, restaurant uses, targeted to families. Those would succeed in your downtown Orlando. You want to create a sense of place with a mix of retail, restaurant, residential, recreational, cultural uses. And that's exactly what we want to create with this project. We are thrilled for the opportunity to come into the city of Oviedo and be able to bring what we think is going to be an incredible project and a legacy project to be really proud of in the future. And that will do a great thing, not just for the community, but also help to bolster the developments around us, such as Oviedo on the Park. If you have any questions, again, the request is for approval tonight of Ordinance 1682, consistent with your professional staff's recommendation for approval. We are happy to answer any questions you have. I'd ask for the opportunity to respond to any comments that come from the public.
All righty, thank you. Any questions right now, or?
No.
Not right now. No, not right now.
Thank you.
I'm sure there'll be more.
Mayor, before you start the public hearing,
Yes.
If I could just do one procedural thing, just to let you know that we did receive correspondence regarding this application. That correspondence is on file with the city clerk. I do believe they even have a copy here for the record at tonight's meeting. So I just wanted to put that on the record that we did receive correspondence, that it is on file with the city clerk. It will be traveling to Tallahassee as part of our submittal package. So.
Emails is what you mean?
Yes, sir.
I think we all there were about, honestly, there were only about 3 of them that came in today, so